Hey everybody, welcome to the Obsidian Paranormal Podcast. I'm Myron.
And I'm Jillian.
And on this episode, we're going to be discussing our 3 investigations of the Conjuring House in Rhode Island. For those that aren't familiar with it, it's the house that the first Conjuring movie was based on.
So with 3 investigations and a lot of history, a lot of pop culture references, where do you think we should start on this one?
I think we should probably start talking maybe about the movie first.
Yeah, of all of the movies in the Conjuring universe, the first one, which is based on this house in Burrillville, Rhode Island, is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, mine too.
And it's interesting that we both saw the Conjuring movie with Lorraine Warren, who plays a huge role in the movie and the history of the house.
Yeah, because this movie is actually based on one of the Warrens' investigations.
Yeah, and we definitely had a near miss where I went to go see the movie when it came out on DVD. Lorraine did a presentation with a dinner, and we all sat at the banquet hall and watched the movie with her.
Yeah, and I had done the same, but it was at an auditorium, and I think it was in the town hall.
Yeah, but it was in the same town in Connecticut, and had we bought different tickets to different events, we could have met a little bit sooner.
Yeah, and we've discovered over the years there's been a few different times where we could have met, but I feel like we met when we were meant to.
Yeah, it happened when it was supposed to happen, just like these investigations. So to give you guys a little bit of a summary of the movie, I just want to say this movie came out in 2013. If you haven't seen it yet, we're going to be spoiling it for you. So if you want to see the movie, pause it now, go watch the movie, and then come back.
Yeah, with that being said, the movie takes place in the 70s. It's about the Perrin family who move into a farmhouse in Rhode Island that they eventually realize is haunted.
Yeah, the dad is named Roger. He's a truck driver, so he travels a lot for work. And the mom's name is Carolyn. She's at home with the 5 girls, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. Throughout the movie, the girls are playing as children do, and one of the games that they play is called hide and clap. And what that is one person is blindfolded, and then the other kids will go and hide throughout the house, and they have to clap to let the person who's blindfolded know where they are. Ends up happening is that while the girls are asleep, the mom hears clapping and thinks one of the kids is out, starts looking for them, and she gets locked in the basement.
And things escalate from there, which leads to them eventually contacting Ed and Lorraine Warren to come in and investigate. And during their investigations, one of the things that Lorraine explains to them is that there's a spirit of a woman named Bathsheba who had been accused of witchcraft and was said to have sacrificed her baby to the devil. And she cursed the land and hanged herself from a tree in the backyard.
She then possesses mothers who move into the house in order to make them kill their children to have more sacrifices. Now, I love a good horror movie, but why is it always witches' faults? Because I swear, we clean up more messes than any other group as far as entities and spirits, and nobody is sacrificing anything to the devil, especially not children. But I digress. It's still a good movie. It ends up that Ed does an exorcism, saves the day, the kids get out, and according to the movie, they live happily ever after. The final scene is Ed putting an artifact from the house into their haunted museum.
Which is funny, too, because we also investigate their museum later on down the line. Actually, Annabelle is also brought into this movie, and we actually investigated her while we were doing the museum. Both the movie version and the real version.
Yeah, so remember to like and subscribe, because we will definitely be doing an episode on that investigation farther on down the road.
And years later, one of the daughters, Andrea, wrote a trilogy of books on this case called House of Darkness, House of Light. And it's quite different from the movies. And one of the things that was debunked was the story of Bathsheba.
Yeah, we even learned all about that on the day tour that we did prior to our scheduled investigation. It's really sad that a lot of people will take the fictionalized tale of this investigation and run with it to the point where the cemetery where this alleged witch is buried, they've had to take her headstone down because people were vandalizing it because they believed what the fictionalized tale was. But the owners of the Conjuring House have worked very hard to debunk that, to make sure that this innocent woman, her name isn't soiled any farther. In fact, the owners have done such a great job with the history that the best way to explain the history of the property is through the packet that we got when we first arrived, which we also uploaded to obsidianparanormal.org. It will be under podcasts and below the show notes and description of this episode if you're not listening to it from our website already.
And one of the first things that they mention on this packet is what is false and or there's no evidence of. And a few of the things that they have listed are there are no records indicating that there were multiple deaths by suicide on the property. The only known questionable death is Jarvis Smith, who was discovered deceased by the Butterworth family that was living at the farm at the time. There is no evidence that Bathsheba ever lived or was associated with the house. There's no evidence, nor was there an inquest of a suspicious death of an infant by a needle on the back of its skull, although it is true that Bathsheba lost 2 children at a young age. There's no evidence that Mrs. John Arnold hung herself in the barn, and there's no evidence that Prudence Arnold ever lived or was associated with the house.
Here is what is known about the history. Quote, "You are standing in a piece of colonial history that is part of the founding of the state of Rhode Island as it began in 1636, known as Providence Plantations. Providence Plantations was the first permanent European-American settlement in the colony of Rhode Island. It was established by a group of colonists led by Roger Williams." Interesting, I never realized that that's the same name of the father of the Perrin family. And Dr. John Clark, who left Massachusetts Bay Colony in order to establish a colony with greater religious freedom. In fact, Roger Williams and his followers were excommunicated from Mass Bay Colony for their vocal beliefs and efforts to establish separation between church and state in Massachusetts. So there's a lot of history about how the colony of Rhode Island came to be. Harrisville, Rhode Island is the town where the farm is located. And then the neighborhood that the farm is located is Burrillville. So you may hear people refer to it as Harrisville and Burrillville. It's the same place. The property that's known as the Conjuring House was passed down through 8 generations. And the house that we investigated was completed in 1736. This is interesting. Since women were not allowed to own land, the property was transferred through a daughter to the husband's and his surname. So that's when it went from the Richardsons to the Arnolds, and then the Arnolds to the Butterworths, and then the Kenyons in the 1900s.
The Perrin family purchased the property in 1970, and they moved in January of 1971. When they bought it, Mr. Earl Kenyon had been living there by himself after the passing of his wife. He was very fond of the Perrins and they him. In fact, the day that the Perrins moved in, Mr. Kenyon told Roger Perrin, "For the sake of your family, keep the lights on at night."
That's actually really significant because we both talked about it, even the first time we went there, that as soon as the sun set, the whole energy of the house changes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Back to the packet and the history. So the day they moved in, the Perrin girls all saw an older gentleman in the house who was dressed weird. However, according to Mr. Kenyon and the Perrins, there was nobody else in the home that day. The Perrin family would later name that entity Manny. Throughout the next few months, Carolyn noticed a lot of strange things occurring. The girls would be playing with imaginary friends, which isn't uncommon, obviously. However, the 2 youngest daughters, Cindy and April, were constantly playing with a boy spirit named Oliver Richardson. A lot of this is coming from Andrea's book that Myron mentioned earlier, but also in one instance, Carolyn was attacked by a hanger when she got out of the shower. I mean, that's legit. I'm sometimes attacked by my own clothes getting ready, but that's a me problem. But the daughter, Cindy, was locked in a trunk at one point, and her bed would levitate at times. Roger wasn't home that often, as we talked about, to see what Carolyn and the girls were experiencing. However, after a few malevolent encounters, one of which a scythe came down off the wall in the barn and injured Carolyn's shoulder and ripped open the coat she was wearing. Carolyn insisted that they needed help. They responded to a local ad in the paper placed by PIRO, which stands for Paranormal Investigation and Research Organization, which was a local college paranormal team ran by Keith and Carl Johnson.
PIRO investigated the home in early July 1973, and after a few visits, they decided to ask Ed and Lorraine Warren to come out and give them their opinion. The Warrens first came to the property in August of 1973 by just showing up at their door. After making the determination that there was some type of malevolent spirit causing the problems, they took over the case as lead investigators. The Warrens believed that the house itself needed to be exorcised, not any specific individual in the household. In order to get permission for the rites of exorcism to be performed, evidence must be presented to the Vatican showing definite proof of the haunting. So October 30th, 1973, Ed and Lorraine Warren came back to the home with another medium, a priest, and 2 videographers to conduct a seance. The entire Perron family was at home during the seance. However, only Roger and Carolyn were supposed to be present during the seance. The kids were supposed to be upstairs in their rooms. However, some of them were hiding in the stairwell watching. During the seance, Carolyn Perron had an entity attached to her. Throughout the course of the seance, it became so aggressive, it levitated the table they were sitting at, and as the table slammed back to the ground, Carolyn Perron was thrown backwards, out of her chair and into the adjoining room. Everyone who witnessed Carolyn's attack thought it killed her, including Roger, who immediately got up to check on her. Ed grabbed Roger by the arm and told him she was possessed, and if he was to touch her, he would be in just as much danger. Roger, who was more concerned about his wife than anything, got into a physical altercation with Ed Warren, after which he forced the Warrens and their entourage to leave and never return. The Perrons continued to live in the home until the summer of 1980, when they decided to leave the property for fear of Carolyn Perron's life.
So there's some similarities to the movie, but a lot of differences, especially the amicable relationship between the Perrons and the Warrens. That was definitely fictionalized.
Also in the movie, the Warrens were there a lot longer than they were in real life.
Yeah, and one of the things that we did during our investigation, which is coming up next, if you've held in here for all of this history, I'm proud of you. But in our investigations, we never want to antagonize the entities, but we did ask if any of the entities had any opinions about Ed and Lorraine Warren. I believe we did get a response to that, and it was, "Don't piss me off," which we never want to do, so we changed the subject. There's a couple other pieces of history that are important to the story of the Conjuring House. So one of the claims of activity is that people see a bent neck lady, and that's because one of the owners actually turned the home into a daycare, and some of the children would draw pictures of what looked like a lady who was hanged, which gave rise to the stories about the witch hanging herself outside the home. The other claim of activity that's significant is that one of the Perron children said that she was hearing that there were 7 dead soldiers in the wall. That's pretty significant because the majority of the state of Rhode Island from 1675 to 1677 was involved in the King's Philip War. This was a war that was over land disputes. It was fought between the colonists and the local Native American tribes. In this war, more people died per capita than any other war fought on U.S. soil. Another reason it's probably not talked about much is because a majority of the deaths were women and children on both sides. So it may be significant that soldiers in the wall weren't necessarily like the wall of the house, but possibly the stone walls that line the property, which we did investigate. But besides the war, it is theorized that there are geological conditions on the property that are conducive to and enable spirits or entities to manifest and engage with people. These geological conditions have yet to be fully explored, but can include the aquifer underneath the house and perhaps abnormal electromagnetic fields. And then to end the packet, the property owner gives us a couple of warnings. So there continues to be much activity in the house. The spirits that they believe reside permanently are a tall, older man, possibly a Quaker who wears a hat, Oliver Richardson, who is a child that April Perrin played with. And they also believe that there are a number of portals that allow spirits to visit and kind of move throughout. And this I find very interesting, and I 100% agree with this. The final statement is, there is no guarantee that you will experience anything. Spirits have free will and do not appear on command. But in our experience, we did experience a lot during all 3 investigations. All right, I promise that is the last of the history. Give yourself a pat on the back for making it this far. It's going to get a lot more interesting from here. I mean, I think history is already interesting, but for people who aren't nerds like me. All right, Myron, is there anything that we left out?
No, I think we pretty much covered a good amount. We got a lot of the history, movies, and some of the claims. So we should probably get on to the investigations now.
I think we earned it. It's important to note that as of the time of this recording, the Conjuring House is currently closed to outside visitors. So please do not try to visit or investigate. It is closed. Our investigations, we had one in July of 2022. The next was in October of 2022. And then our final investigation before it closed was in March of 2024. So one of the things that I love about this investigation, and I feel like I say that about all of our investigations, is just because I love what we do so much. But for this particular one, we got to do a day tour and get all of the history and all of the claims of activities before the investigation. So driving up, it's this beautiful, bucolic residential area. And when we parked and went inside, the entire atmosphere shifted. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, it's definitely a different feeling as soon as you walk in the door. Like, I can't really explain it. And I don't know if it's because of knowing the history from the movies and the books and the documentaries and everything. And if it's in your brain that, this is what it's going to be like. But I would say it's not that. Like, you can feel a difference. And other people that we had gone there with said the same thing. So.
Yeah, it's like the atmosphere is charged, or you feel like you're moving into a time in between, like a liminal space where it's now, but it's also then. It's now, but it's also what isn't yet. It's just this very cool energy that I don't think there's any other place we've investigated that really felt like that.
But I will say it's a positive feel when you when we first walked in there. The thing that I felt was positive. It wasn't like
malevolent at all. No, like I felt it was almost like a welcoming. I really missed that home since it's been closed for investigations. I felt somewhat like a belonging there. So yeah, I would agree. Very positive, at least during the day. But we'll get into that later. The day tour did allow us to really get the lay of the land.
Which comes in handy when you want to know where to set up your cameras for the investigation.
Yeah, so after the day tour, we went back home. We were able to plot and plan and really felt good and well prepared for the overnight investigation, which this was our longest investigation at 13 hours. So we really needed to make sure that we were on our A game.
So for this investigation, we had 2 guests with us.
One of which actually became a team member a few years later. And I think it's interesting that the mother of the Perrin family was named Carolyn, and the team member who was on 2 of the 3 investigations with us was Caroline. I personally think that's something of note. And I find it really interesting that you and I were so prepared going in. We knew where the cameras were going to go. We had toured the site. We had 2 people with us that were willing and able and excited to investigate with us. Caroline is an experienced investigator of many years before we met. And still, this house threw us for a loop. We had 13 hours of solid investigating time. And then we found out that time doesn't work in this house. Like, I don't know any other way to say it. It's like the perception of time when the sun set completely changes. Like 5 minutes would feel like an hour would feel like 5 minutes. We kept on looking at our clocks to be like, oh, we're only halfway through. And it'd be like, no, we've only been doing this for a half an hour.
Yeah, and the time thing was so different that there was actually a room or 2 that we didn't even investigate while we were there for the 13-hour investigation.
Like, how do you have 13 hours in one building and still not cover the whole thing? That's what makes it so insane to me, is that we are seasoned professionals here and just time didn't work.
And the house in person is not as big as the house in the movie. So you would think when you're in this place that 13 hours would be more than enough time to investigate the whole place. And it really wasn't.
Yeah. And just to give you an idea, you walk in, you're in the foyer, and there's only the kitchen, the living room, and the library, and a bathroom down there. And then upstairs, there's 3 bedrooms, and then there's a basement. That's it. 13 hours, and we missed rooms, which is why on the second investigation a few months later, we would set a timer for every room that we came into. So we hit every spot on the second investigation because you learn from your mistakes. And speaking about time, we have so much more to cover on this. We're going to need to go to a part 2. But what we'll do is, instead of making you wait for 2 weeks for the next episode, we'll record part 2 and have it for you next week.
Yeah, and so on the next episode, we'll just be discussing the investigations and the evidence.
And of course, our theories about them.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for all of your love and support. Please continue to send in your personal stories to obsidianparanormal@gmail.com. You can find us all over social media at Obsidian Paranormal. Our website is obsidianparanormal.org. And as always, stay spooky, and we'll see you soon in part 2.